Right, the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Bereshis. Let's look at the first verse, which says in English, Elohim said, "Let us make man in our image, as our likeness, and let him dominate the fish of the sea, the birds of the heaven, the animals, all the earth, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." Now, there's something very perplexing in this verse. I'll say it first in Hebrew, because the very beginning of the verse is, Vayomer Elohim nase Adam b'tzalmeinu k'demusenu, which translates as, Elohim said, "Let us make man in our image, as our likeness." Who is the "let us" over here? I mean, we're talking about the creation of man. I mean, who could Hashem have spoken to say, "Let us make man"? And then there's a further implication, which is that Hashem had help in the creation of man, which that contradicts every tenet of Judaism. So what is going on over here? Who is Hashem speaking to? Did he have help? So our rabbis say, no. Hashem didn't have help. And so then who's he speaking to over here? I mean, okay, he didn't have help, but is he talking to himself? So one opinion in the Zera Shimshon, which is another piece which we're not going to go too much into today, says that he was talking to the souls of the great righteous people who would one day live and saying, hey, you guys up here in heaven are on a very high level. Do you guys want to risk going down into the world, into bodies, and perhaps losing all of your merits that you have up here? And that's one opinion. Another opinion that the Zera Shimshon goes with, which is the piece that we're going to be using today, is that he was talking to the Malachei Asharis, to the angels who served before him. Now, okay, but does that mean that the angels helped God create man? So, once again, our rabbis say, no. Okay, but if they didn't help man be created, then what is the purpose of God saying, like, let us make man in our image? I mean, what is Hashem talking to them for at all over here? So we actually have an interesting custom that correlates to this, which is that on Friday night you have the Baal Bayis, the master of the house. He grabs the bread, about to make hamotzi, but before saying Baruch Atah Hashem, the first words of the blessings, he says the words Bereshis, which literally means with permission. So he's essentially asking the people around the table for permission to break bread. Now that's kind of strange. He's the Baal Bayis. He's the owner of the house. He's the one breaking bread. Everybody else is subservient to him. He doesn't need their permission to break bread. So why is he doing that? So actually our rabbis tell us that this custom we learn out from Hashem himself. Hashem is the Baal Bayis, so to speak, of the world, the owner of the world, and he did not need the angels for anything. Yet he still kind of wanted them to feel invested, so to speak. So he, so to speak, asked them for their permission to create man. So even though he didn't need their permission, even though he was probably going to do it anyways, we learn a nice character trait over here. That if you're like the CEO of a company, or, you are in a position of power over somebody, that it's a nice thing to consult with those below you and make them feel invested, right? Like people tell politicians, don't say, I achieved this, I achieved that, say, we achieved. Even if it's really I, say we, because you want the people to feel invested. And that's what we learn from Hashem over here, because it says, Nase Adam Salmenu. He was speaking to the angels and said, let us make man in our image. Now, that's a nice idea. But Moshe Rabbeinu himself had a very big kasha on this whole teaching. So when Moshe Rabbeinu was writing down the Torah, he's writing it word for word, and he gets to this verse, and he goes, whoa, Hashem, what is going on over here? You are making me write something that sounds very heretical. Now, granted, I know the truth. I know you created the world by yourself, but people are going to make mistakes, and they're going to go off the derech. They're going to become heretics. Hashem said, no. I want you to write it down the way it is, and let them think that I created the world with help. Let this be a shred of false evidence for those heretics whose hearts lead them astray anyways. So Zera Shimshon says, what kind of response is this from Hashem? What is going on over here? So to explain this, I'm going to give you a few mishalim, a few parables. One is that one of the great rabbis of the past few hundred years was named the Chassam Sofer, who had also a great son whose name was the Ksav Sofer. And one day the Ksav Sofer asked the Chassam Sofer a question in philosophy and in Jewish fundamentals, and something that for maybe perhaps other people might affect their faith if they didn't get an answer for. And his father, the Chassam Sofer, didn't respond. He heard the question and he didn't respond. 4 or 5 days later, the father comes back to him and gives him a response to the question. So the Ksav Sofer says to his father, the Chassam Sofer, oh, look, my question was so good, probably, that's why it took you a few days to respond. And the father responded back. The Chassam Sofer said to the Ksav Sofer, no, I could have responded this right away. I knew the answer right away. So then the son said, well, why then did you hesitate? He said, because I wanted to teach you a lesson. What lesson? You see, you asked me a question in something that is a fundamental aspect of Jewish faith and philosophy that many people, perhaps, would leave the faith if they didn't get an answer for. But I wanted you to learn, since you're an earnest Jew, and you asked the question earnestly with pure heart, and I let you sit with it for days, and it didn't affect your service of Hashem because you didn't have an answer. You kept serving Hashem the way you normally do. Because I wanted to teach you that even when you don't have an answer to your questions, you can still be a faithful Jew. And not only that, if you keep serving him when you don't have the answer to the question, you will get the answer to the question like you just did. Because the saying goes, nobody goes off the derech, nobody becomes a heretic because of a kasha, because of a question. So, for example, the Brisker Rav, the local town heretic, came up to him and said, "Hey, Rabbi, I have some questions for you." The Brisker Rav said, No, you don't have questions, my friend. You have answers. Because nobody goes off the derech because of a question. Anytime a Jew in earnest asks a question and he really meant it, he does not go off the derech. Only people whose heart is already predisposed to heresy, those people, because they don't get answers to the question, end up somewhere else. So with this background, we can understand the Zera Shimshon's answer to our question. See, Moshe Rabbeinu is writing it down, says, Nasa Adam B'Tzelmeinu, let us make man in our image, and he starts to protest. But he doesn't have access yet to the very next verse, right? Like, we have the whole Chumash written down, okay, today, but Moshe Rabbeinu was literally writing it down for the first time, line by line. And Hashem said to him, no, let them think I created the world with help. Because if they asked the question in earnest and had patience, they would get the answer to their question right away. But Moshe's like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, let's keep going, Moshe. Keep going. Keep writing, okay? All right, Hashem, I'll do what you say. And then look, they literally write the next verse. And the next verse says, Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam b'tzalmo b'tzelem Elokim bar oso zachor nekeva bar osam. And thus Elokim created man in his image. In the form of Elokim, he created him. Man and female, he created them. The literal next verse proves that it was only God who created the world. So in verse 26, it implies maybe he has help. And in verse 27, it says explicitly he didn't have help. So meaning the heretic person, he is just going to read verse 26, and since he's already predisposed to heresy in his heart, he's just going to say, this proves my thesis. I've known all along that the Torah is not real. And he's just going to walk away. He has no more patience. But a Jew who's not like that, he's going to say, well, that can't be correct because God would not create the world with help. So you know what? I'm going to do more investigation, and if I don't find anything, I'm going to be patient. And look, it's literally right under their nose. The verse that confirms that Hashem created the world alone is right there, right under their nose. And just with a little bit of patience, you're going to get the answers to your questions. To be honest, there is no better parsha to learn this idea of patience and when you deal with fundamentals of Jewish faith and philosophy than Parshas Bereshis. So it's great that we're learning this at the beginning of the year when we read things in the Torah where that might not necessarily make 100% sense to us, but let us merit to have the patience to be able to trust in Hashem, and we'll find those answers and we'll write them down and log them. Have a great Shabbos.